Affordable housing is important across Nova Scotia, but it's also here in East Hants. There are developments going up and the rents are out of many people's price range, meaning they have to choose between food and rent. How would you, as MLA, and Gary, if elected as Premier, work to ensure this is fixed?
Well, the first thing that people need to understand is that the housing crisis is not an HRM problem. It's not even an HRM and CPRM problem. It's not a city problem. There are lower vacancy rates in big parts of the South Shore, the Valley, and Hants County than there are in Halifax today. And this, of course, is having this tremendous upward pressure on rents in an unregulated environment. So we believe in permanent rent control. We think that this is a system for regulating sudden, dramatic, unsubstantiated rent increases that a majority of Canadians have the benefit of. And we ought to have it here in Nova Scotia. We did have it in Nova Scotia until the middle 90s when a previous Liberal government did away with it. And if we're able to be successful in this election, we're going to bring it back.
All right. If elected Premier, what would you do to address lowering speed limits on highways like Highway 2 and residential subdivisions that now see the bulk of their use from families traveling to and from their suburban homes?
Yeah, so we already in the NDP have introduced legislation that would give municipalities across the province the right to regulate speed limits for themselves. We think that that's something that the municipality shouldn't have to turn to the provincial government to every time they want to do that. That if a municipality wants to, for example, bring in a 40 or a 45, even 35 speed limit, that they ought to have that authority to make that kind of a decision. So that's how we look at it.
All right. With incumbents not reoffering in both Hants East and Waverley Fall River Beaverbank, and both having been Liberal ridings, this question: what does Eddie and Christina have to do to turn the riding NDP orange?
Well, what we in the NDP have to do in order to win these ridings, first off, is to have outstanding candidates, and that's exactly what we have. When we know that when there isn't an incumbent, there is an open aspect about the riding that doesn't exist otherwise. So it's very important from a political party's point of view, when you have a non-incumbent riding, to have the very best candidates that you can bring forward. And in Waverley Fall River Beaverbank and in Hants East, that's exactly what we have.
In East Hants, there are almost 2 handfuls of doctors going to retire or have retired, leaving families without a family doctor. How would Eddie and the province, Eddie, if elected as MLA, and the province be able to address this if you're elected as Premier?
Yeah, well, this is an area of spectacular failure on the present government's part. We think about the fact that they came into office 8 years ago with the primary commitment that they would provide a doctor for everybody in the province, and yet we see in the last couple of days that the needed family doctor registry has gone up to over 70,000 people. So this matter has been neglected over these 8 years, particularly in the early years of the Liberal mandate, when they concentrated so much effort on creating a consolidated health authority, when really there were many other issues that needed to be attended to, including providing doctors and primary care. So this isn't going to be fixed overnight. It is a complex matter. I certainly will acknowledge that, but we do need to understand it is a problem, the doctor shortage, the primary care shortage, that is amenable to solution. And one of the main solutions is to do like many other jurisdictions which are similar to Nova Scotia in the makeup, is to bring in the position of physician assistants. In the United States, physician assistants are usually called physician extenders. They take up to about 30% of a doctor's more routine responsibilities, so that a doctor is able, in fact, to have a caseload of 30% more than they might otherwise. So it's really a matter of working in primary care to make sure all primary care providers, doctors, family practice nurses, pharmacists and others, are able to work to the full scope of their practice. But in particular, we don't have physician assistants working to any scope of practice at all, and that's the step we need to take.
Gary, with such a long campaign, how do you stay healthy and eat properly?
Well, I make a point of taking a walk of at least 45 minutes every day, even if I have to do that pretty late in the day, and I find that practice has served me pretty well.
Any fruits, vegetables on the Burrill mobile?
Oh yes, I try to be pretty careful about that. But in particular, I find when it's a question of stamina, if you're walking every day, it's pretty hard to beat.
All right. And last question. And it hasn't seemed to be talked about a lot during any of the leaders' debate. Education. If elected as premier, what would an NDP plan look like for a safe back-to-school return with COVID-19 still in our midst? Would you mandate that school staff be vaccinated?
Yeah, the first thing to say about this is that we have in Nova Scotia been very well served by our public health authorities. And this is a matter where we need to take guidance from them. So that's where we have our epidemiologists and immunologists and virologists. These are people who have a proven track record over a year and a half of understanding what's needed in Nova Scotia and the kind of guidance that we should be given. So the first thing to really say is that we would rely on the guidance of public health. Although I'll also say I think that it would be very important to make sure that whatever path is going to be followed, that parents and students have lots of lead time and lots of information ahead of time. This is an area where the Liberal Party has fallen some short through COVID. So lots of information, lots of lead time, no last minute turns, but relying completely on public health.